But for those of you that I haven't met, as Dennis mentioned, I am the editor-in-chief of the Scuttlebutt newsletter, and I have been for almost 10 years now. It has been, thank you. Honestly, it's been one of the most rewarding and fun jobs that I've ever had in my life, and I'm so proud to be here, and I'm proud to be your editor. It was for those World War II veterans that I first got involved. But more specifically, I got involved because of my grandfather, Stephen Gansberger, who my book is about. My grandfather, Stephen Gansberger, served in the amphibious forces in the US Navy in World War II. He started out as a gunner and ended up as a quartermaster. And he earned a Silver Star and 2 Bronze Service Stars for fighting in 7 campaigns in the South Pacific from 1942 to 1945. However, he didn't serve on an LST. He served on a different ship called the Landing Craft Infantry, or LCI. And he served on 2 different LCIs throughout the war. USS LCI L-329 and the USS LCI G-65. And they were quite a bit different than the LSTs in that the LCIs were much smaller at around 158 feet long. Even though both his LCIs landed troops on enemy-held beaches at one point, like LSTs, his second ship, the LCI-G, meaning the LCI gunboat, was a little different because it was converted from a troop carrier to a gunboat, which meant that its primary role went from landing troops to protecting the troops. Because of that, they went in with the first waves. And growing up, I used to spend hours just listening to my grandpa tell war stories. And even at a very young age, I was hooked. There was just something about listening to his adventures from the war years that gave me an interest in history, especially World War II history. And even though I didn't know it at the time, there was also something about the fact that he talked to me, his grandson, about it when he had spent most of his life like most of the greatest generation, and they didn't really talk about it that much. You know, maybe he started talking to me about it because of his old age, or maybe because he had a change of heart at some point before I came along. Maybe it was because I just happened to know which questions to ask him. Or maybe he talked to me about it simply because even though there was a 62-year difference between us, we were a lot alike. But it was because he never really talked about it that much that I'd always wanted to sit down and interview him about his World War II experience and record it. And I was so lucky, because on May 18th, 2011, I finally got to interview him about his experience, complete with maps, official documents, and all. I had come prepared to that interview. And the stories he told me about the LCIs that day blew me away. Stories of Japanese bombers and General MacArthur. Stories of kamikaze pilots and best friends lost. I had no idea what LCIs were at the time, and I went into that interview with an already extensive knowledge of World War II history, but words like amphibious forces and LCI gunboat were completely foreign to me. But the information he gave me that day was invaluable, and I got the story from him literally not a moment too soon, not a minute to spare, because 2 days later he passed away. He was 86. He was 3 months shy of his 87th birthday. And he was eventually laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery in September of 2011. But he was a great man with a lot of friends. And one of those friends was Congressman John Dingell from the state of Michigan. Some of you might remember that name. He was the longest serving congressman in US history. Dingell also served in the Army in World War II. And during the war, his friend John Dingell had earned himself the nickname Artillery John because of his precision targeting capabilities with a 75mm gun. And after the war, Dingell was elected to the US House of Representatives for what would become a 59-year consecutive term that he would serve for Michigan's 15th and 12th congressional districts. And my grandparents were both involved in the local city councils in Michigan, and it's through those political connections that my grandpa and Dingell started to become friends. And once they met, they became lifelong friends. And 4 days after my grandpa passed away, John Dingell, who was still a congressman at the time, wrote a letter to my grandma and our family. And I'd like to share a short passage from that letter with you all. In it, Dingell wrote, "To my dear friend Patricia Gansberger," my grandma, "her family, and their children. Each of us can look back on someone who made a great difference in our lives, a person whose wisdom and simple acts of caring made a lasting impression. Steve Gansberger was such an individual." And Dingell concluded his letter by writing, "Today, you honor a man who lived his life with patience and purpose. His children will be able to tell their children that he not only stood for all that is good, he always took action." But if I could, I just want to say a couple more things about the World War II LST veterans tonight, because after all, they are the reason that I'm in my position, standing here, right here with you. Throughout my life, my grandpa made an indelible mark on me, and I'm proud and honored to carry that. I was very lucky and blessed to have known him. I looked at him with the same admiration that I stand here tonight and look at you LST World War II veterans with. To be completely honest, for me, when I'm in the presence of World War II veterans, I react the same way that the rest of society reacts when they see celebrities. Because simply put, you gentlemen, you old salts of the greatest generation, and the things you did so many years ago are larger than life. It is a sense of appreciation that cannot be described or put into words. It is an appreciation that I know is shared by friends and family that are here tonight. It is an appreciation that I hold very dear. And it is an appreciation that I treasure and always will. And there's an indescribably large amount of words that I could stand up here and say, but the words that I want to focus on and express to you tonight above all others is simply, thank you. Thank you to all the LST veterans from all wars and conflicts that served this country, especially the ones in World War II who saw the darkest days that humanity's ever seen. And to those men in particular, both with us and deceased, I want to say thank you for the hardships that you were forced to endure while aboard those LSTs far from home. But most of all, I want to thank your brothers and your buddies that tragically weren't able to make it home. The ones who weren't lucky enough to come back and hug their mothers and fathers one more time. The ones who remind me the meaning behind the words that are inscribed in the famous Kohima War Cemetery's entrance in Burma, Southeast Asia, which is now present-day Myanmar. That inscription reads, "When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today." Men of the European theater, like the sailors aboard the LST 313 who perished 80 years ago at the invasion of Gela, Sicily in July 1943. Men of the Pacific theater, like the sailors aboard the LST 455, known later as the amphibious repair ship USS Achilles, who were killed in action on Bloody Sunday on November 12, 1944 during the campaign at Leyte, Philippines. And especially to the good kids of the amphibious force, like my grandpa's close buddy, Lester Eugene Aston, the cook aboard the LCIG 65 who was killed by a kamikaze plane during the invasion of Leyte Gulf on October 24th, 1944. He was only 19. Thank you to them. I'll never forget a line I read one time in the famous introduction to those old Bantam World War II books that some of you might remember reading. That said, when describing the men that were lost in World War II, quote, "They exchanged their lives in a hope for this future we now inhabit. Though the fight took place many years ago, each of us descendants of the amphibious force veterans remain as a living part of it in a certain way. All of us remain as a living part of it. All we have to do is remember them. That's our responsibility now. Us descendants of the World War II amphibious force veterans are exactly what Marine Corps Colonel C.B. Cates described to the 1st Marine Division in his letter to them the night before the Guadalcanal invasion in 1942. In his letter, Colonel Cates wrote, "We are fighting for a just cause. There is no doubt about that. It is for the right of liberty and freedom for our loved ones. We will guarantee that same liberty and freedom not only for our loved ones, but to the people of America for generations to come." 81 years later, since he wrote that letter, I'm proud to stand here as a member of one of those generations that Colonel Cates spoke of, to declare to you gentlemen in the greatest generation that he was absolutely right. Your sacrifices, fighting, and the things that you once did for this country are the reason that I'm able to stand up here today with the freedoms and liberty that I enjoy for as long as they may last. I will be able to tell my children and my grandchildren about their journeys. They are the reason that this country will be able to look back at the sailors of the landing ship tank and the landing craft infantry and all the American amphibians of the Gator Navy who fought in World War II with the same admiration that I still look at my grandfather with. They were the men of the GI generation. They were the old salts of World War II. That is their story for all time. Nobody can take that away from them. And against all odds, they did the impossible. But as a wise woman once said, impossible is not fact. Impossible is an opinion. And the fact is, they are and always will be remembered as incredible men. And it is because of them that I'm so proud to be your editor-in-chief for the last 10 years. When I first started volunteering for the World War II Veterans Associations, my motto has always been that as long as there was even just one or two of you left that wanted to get together each year and keep in touch, I would do whatever I could to make that happen. And I intend on doing my best to stick to that promise. And with that, I want to say thank you one more time to the LST Association and our board of directors. I want to say thank you to Nehemiah Communications for all their hard work year after year in putting this reunion together. And I want to thank every single one of you for coming out tonight. Thank you.